Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode in our video PowerPoint series for Unit 1, the Scientific Method. Today what we're going to be talking about are the characteristics of life, or basically what classifies something as being alive. There's a set amount of traits that it needs to hit for something to be considered alive, and, well, something to not be considered alive. So basically we're going to be showing you why, for example, elephants here, as you can see down there, are indeed alive, and something like a rock is not quite alive. So please go ahead, follow through as we go through these. I will not be up here in the corner due to size constraints on the slides, so I will see all of you at the end of the PowerPoint. Until then, please go ahead and listen to the sultry sound of my voice as we go ahead and follow through the characteristics of life. So, as we were saying before, life. Here are some basic characteristics. Well, you don't have to write these down. We're going to be going through them in detail. But some things that are alive all share some same basic properties. For example, they all have cellular organization. They're made of cells. They all reproduce in some way, shape, or form. They have a metabolism, or they obtain and use energy from their environment. They maintain homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is a pretty cool little concept that basically means balance, keeping balance between itself and the environment. We have heredity. Heredity is basically an organism's ability to pass genes on from one generation to the next. We have responsiveness to their environment that they live in. We also have growth and development, and they adapt through evolution over time. So let's go ahead and get some specific examples of what we're going to be talking about today. So let's start off here. All living things are made up of cells. So just a nice little review. Cells are the smallest unit capable of all of life's functions. So everything we do, cells can do. On a much smaller scale, mind you. There are unicellular organisms, so uni meaning one, cellular meaning cell. The entire organism is made up of one single cell. Some examples include bacteria and protists. So here we have two nice examples of this down below. We have a protista on the right, and we have some bacteria on the... scratch that. Reverse it. We have bacteria on the right and a protist on the left. Now, we also have multicellular organisms. So multicellular organisms basically mean the organism is made up of many different types of cells. And each of the cells have a specialized function within the organism. So here we've got examples of plant cells. Now let's think about ourselves here. Now we, much like plants, are made up of cells, but we're not made of plant cells, we're made of animal cells. So all these cells have a specialized function within us. For example, we have skin cells, we have red blood cells, white blood cells, nerve cells, muscle cells, all of which have a specific function inside our body. So all living things must reproduce. Reproduction is a process of producing new organisms of the same type. So they have to be of the same type. It's not like you'd be able to go ahead and have two hippos go ahead and mate and produce a giraffe. That just doesn't happen like that. So we have asexual reproduction, which is the first type. Asexual reproduction is a single parent organism reproducing by itself. So what we have here is this primarily happens with our unicellular organisms and some multicellular. What they do is they basically go ahead and divide themselves in half, or pinch off part of their body, and it creates an identical copy of them. So for example, this isn't how it works, but if we went ahead and let's say we took our arm and tore it off and threw it on the ground. Now, this is an extreme example, but follow me. So once we did that, all of a sudden, over time, an exact clone of ourselves grew from that single arm. That would be an example of asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, on the other hand, involves two different parent organisms contributing genetic information. This involves the combination of male and female sex cells. So we have sperm from the male and eggs from the female. So in this case, we have mama penguin and daddy penguin make a baby penguin, each going ahead and contributing its own unique set of genetic information to the offspring. All living things also obtain and use energy. So living organisms need energy to grow, develop, repair damage, and reproduce. Without energy, we wouldn't be able to do any of these things. So here we have a little sea otter going ahead and crunching down on a crab, going ahead and obtaining energy from its environment. So the processes of this basically break down into anabolism. So anabolism is the process of building up complex substances from simpler substances. For example, building up cells and cellular components, and the process of photosynthesis, or obtaining energy from simple things like water, CO2, and sunlight. So, like we said before, sunlight, CO2, and water go in, and it releases oxygen and glucose, a type of energy in the form of sugar. Now we also have something called catabolism. So catabolism is the opposite of anabolism, which is the process of breaking down complex substances into simpler substances to release energy. So think of it like digestion or cellular respiration. We take in the glucose, we take in the oxygen, and we go ahead and break it down into water, CO2, and energy. We can go ahead and combine all of these into what we know as metabolism. So metabolism is the total of all chemical reactions inside an organism. So that's anabolism plus catabolism equals metabolism, taking in energy and simple substances to build up energy, and also the process of breaking down those substances to release said energy for the rest of our body to use. So we'll be talking about this much later on in the year, but we will be coming back to the process of metabolism. For example, cell respiration and photosynthesis. Before you leave this class, you'll have it down. I promise. So all organisms maintain something called homeostasis. So homeostasis is a stable state of conditions in the body that are necessary for life. For example, body temperature, blood volume, pH balance, water balance. We need all of these things inside of our body to be equal and stable. For example, our body temperature. Our body temperature is somewhere around 98 degrees. Now, if we have an increase in body temperature, we get sick. Same thing if we have a decrease in body temperature. Blood volume. If the volume of blood in our veins suddenly changed, we could have a huge decrease in blood pressure, which is no good, or we could have an increase in blood pressure to where our veins potentially burst, which is not good in any way, shape, or form. pH balance. So we need to maintain a specific amount of pH inside of our body. So the pH is basically the amount of acidity or base that a substance has. For example, our blood in our veins has a pH of around 7, which is neutral, kind of like water. Can you imagine what would happen if the pH suddenly dropped down to something like the acid inside of our stomach? It would basically eat us away from the inside out, which is terrible. So homeostasis is maintaining balance, and balance is extremely important in our lives. All organisms also pass along hereditary traits. So genes, our genes carry information that is hereditary. Now, when I say genes, we're talking about your DNA. I'm not talking about your Levi's or Urban Outfitter or whatever it is you young kids wear these days. We're talking about inside your DNA. Now, genes are composed of DNA. And heredity is the reason why children resemble their parents. So now mutations can change the DNA code and can be passed on from generation to generation as well. But primarily the important thing here is that we are passing genes on, or genetic information, from one generation to the next. Now, this does not mean that you are identical copies of your parents. Most likely, you'll find that you have certain traits that are more like your mother and certain traits that are more like your father. So that's basically how that works. All living things respond to their environment. So organisms react to stimuli. For example, light, temperature, odor, sound, gravity, heat, water, and pressure. So organisms react to this. For example, plants will grow towards light. Temperature. If we get cold, what does our body start to do? We shiver to go ahead and increase our body temperature. Odor. If something smells foul, chances are you're not going to be sticking around there very long. Sound. Gravity, heat, water, and pressure are all things that we react to on a regular basis. If you go ahead, go up to a rock and say, "Hey! Hey, rock! Hey! Hey, rock!" Is it going to move? No. All you're going to do is make yourself look like a fool for yelling at a rock. So an example is a plant's leaves and stems growing towards light, like we covered earlier. So all living things grow. So over time, basically all organisms start off relatively small. For example, think of it like when you were a child, more specifically a baby. You were basically a little person. And then over time, you gradually grew into the person you are today. And you'll continue to grow until you reach a set point in your life. Now, growth basically means, by definition, to get bigger in size. That's how we can go from baby elephant to mama elephant, increasing in size as they progress through life. Now, all living things also develop. So by development, we're talking about a change in the physical form or physiological makeup of an organism. For example, think caterpillars. So caterpillars start off as rotund little worm-like creatures that eventually go ahead, encase themselves in a cocoon or chrysalis, and metamorphosize into a butterfly or moth, depending on the species. So we're talking about a physiological change. So the structures of the organism are changing. Now this includes even us humans. So humans, as we grow and develop, specifically when we hit that magical time of puberty, we have changes inside of our bodies that go ahead and change. For example, the voice drops in males, and development of secondary sexual traits, all of which are changes and developments inside the body. So all living things also adapt to their environment through evolution. An adaptation, by definition, is a process that enables organisms to become better suited to their environment. And species obtain adaptations through evolution over great periods of time. So over time, organisms gradually go ahead and become more suited to their environment, or they die off. Survival of the fittest, we're talking Charles Darwin here. Now, an example of this is we're going to talk about something on the next slide that basically gives some strong evidence for this point. So think about it like this. Plants, right? One of the biggest things plants need is water. However, there's not a lot of water in desert environments. So, an example of adaptation here, desert plants have succulent waxy leaves and stems to store water and reduce water loss. So, these stems of things like cacti, the stems are incredibly thick and they have waxy leaves to help them store water and reduce the amount they lose through evaporation. Also, I don't know if any of you have ever touched a cactus, but it's not a very pleasant experience. They have spines covering their body that release a very painful sting if you've ever come in contact with one. So all of these are examples of adaptations attained over time to help survivability. Hello again. Good to see you. I hope you've been well. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about today is another mnemonic device to help you go ahead and remember the characteristics of living organisms. The mnemonic device for today is called Go Racer. For example, the G stands for growth and development. The O is obtain and use energy. R, react to stimuli, so reacting to the environment. A, adapting to the environment, so going ahead and, like the cactus, getting changes to help improve your survivability in your area. C stands for cells. E, evolution, or evolving over time in response to the environment. And going ahead and reproducing for the final R, or passing on genes. So that does it for today. Thank you for joining us for another episode here of Unit 1, the scientific method. I hope you all learned something. Until next time, you keep it classy, and I will see you in the next video. Take it easy.